Hello and welcome to Mission Nonprofit. I'm your host, Robert Cam. On Mission Nonprofit, we feature a local nonprofit organization from the Thurston County area, and this month we're featuring Panza, which is the nonprofit in charge of Quixote Village. And with me to talk about Panza and Quixote Village is Tim Ransom and Raul Salazar. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, Tim, you are the board president of Panza,
Of Panza,
which
yes.
is in charge of
So to
Quixote
speak,
Village.
yes.
Okay.
We started as a support nonprofit to the residents of Camp Quixote. We got in a position of being able to build the village, but we try and share as much of the running of it with the residents who are started out as a self-governing community as we can. So.
Yeah, and I remember when this happened,
Right.
2007, we had a protest basically downtown. All these tents were set up, and so because the homeless didn't have anywhere to be, there was an ordinance that was passed saying they can't be on the streets, so they set up in a parking lot.
They did.
And
where
did they go from there?
Well, fairly predictably and quickly, the city responded rather aggressively to that Occupy movement, so to speak, and were threatening to physically evict those folks and take their possessions and so on. So through connections that some city council members had with us being the Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation up on the west side, they knew that we were sponsoring a shelter, a small family shelter at the time. We had space. They came and said, could you take this encampment? And after a lot of intense decision making, because it's a congregational system where the members of the church decide what to do, the board first and then the membership decided that we would. And so we invited the residents of what was then Camp Quixote 1 to come with us, to be with us, and that started their essentially 7-year history of being a faith community sponsored tent camp that moved from church to church.
And back in those days, it was kind of similar to what you have now at Quixote Village, where you had the communal tent where they could have breakfast and you go through donated items and things like that.
Right.
But now you have a building.
Now we have a building, and we actually have 31 buildings because there are 30 cottages instead of tents. And each cottage has a half bath and a toilet and sink. And everything else that you would hope for in your living situation is in the community building, which is showers and baths and more commodes, a full sort of industrial double-sized kitchen, laundry room, coin-operated laundry, and meeting rooms and offices for our staff.
And so this was built recently. This was a few years ago?
It was built in 2013. We got an array of funding, most of which was from governmental sources, and began construction in the summer of 2013, and were able to open our doors on Christmas Eve, which was, a very emotional time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I was reading on your website, which, by the way, their website is QuixoteVillage.com.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can go there and learn more about it. See some
Absolutely.
pictures. And actually, we're going to show you some pictures in the program. But I was impressed by your sponsors and how much money they gave. And one big one was Thurston County.
It was, and the Thurston County's really big gift to us, if you will, was property. That there came a time when the City of Olympia and Thurston County were helping us look for available empty space, and eventually it turned out to be a Thurston County lot within the City of Olympia off Mountain Road, and they leased it to us for $1 a year for 41 years. And so that was about $300,000 worth of effort right there. There's also some of the money that the city administers from federal sources has come to us both for construction and operations.
So you got some county money, you
Right.
got some state money, and some federal money.
The big one was the state money. That was the beginning of it all. One of our board members, Jill Severin, has had a lot of experience in state work. She used to write speeches for Booth Gardner, and knew everybody, and invited a couple of high-ranking members of the legislature over for dinner one night, she basically wined and dined them and told them the story of the camp's hope for a permanent site. And by the time they were done, they were talking money. And so the state, from its housing trust fund, came up with $1.5 million for our project, which was a huge start.
It's a $3 million project?
It's
is that right?
3.1, including the cost of that property, which was not a financial outlay, and a cost of the construction of everything, but also a fairly significant amount for stormwater control, because it's one of those situations where the land was pretty poor in letting water percolate through, and so we had to go the extra mile to take care of that. Plus, in line with our funding sources, it was very advantageous to do as much as we could in environmental good building practices. And so things cost a bit more in order to satisfy those kinds of criteria.
And I guess you also want to give a shout out to the tribes, the Nisqually and Chehalis tribes.
Yes, both tribes have been very faithful sponsors through their annual gifting. And of course, our real base, both financially and otherwise, has always been the volunteer community, the faith community, all of whom gave quite a bit towards construction, including some labor, and who continue to support us for operations.
Right, because there's ongoing needs for...
Yes. Right. We have a operations budget in excess of $250,000, and that includes 2 full-time staff, Raul and our resident advocate, Alicia Crumpton, as well as we are both in our funding for operations, for construction, and now funding for operations. We are building reserve funds both for maintenance and for replacement and for operations, should somehow our income not keep up with us in the future.
So Raul, what are some of the expenses that are ongoing with the village? I mean, you guys have to pay for, electricity, water, sewer, things like that.
Yes. And then there's unexpected expenses, anything from maintenance issues with some of the units. Our first year, we were under warranty for a lot of that type of thing, but there's always something unexpected that could come up. The supplies that we use, the cleaning products, paper products, anything we use in the community building, certain things that we use that we make available to the residents, things like that.
But I was also noticing that a lot of that stuff they get from the food bank and from probably the other bank, which is the YWCA's program. So some of that stuff comes from there, but you also have to purchase some for the community building, I would imagine, things like that.
Yeah. We part of the process that we have in place with the residents is that everybody does their part as far as doing chores, if you will, helping to keep the property clean, the community building clean, and we provide all the cleaning products for that. So we don't usually get that from donations or anything like that. We purchase.
If I may add, another shout out is to Intercity Transit, who donated a van to us.
Yes.
Oh, great.
And so we have transportation expenses. The site is relatively far away from downtown, so for the residents to get to the food bank and also some of the services they are making use of, their transportation needs, which we're filling as well.
Raul, can you tell me about the qualifications that you have to be a resident of Quixote Village?
Yes, to be a resident there, we put together kind of a pre-screening application that people have to go through before they get on our waiting list. And on that application, it asks, are you currently homeless in Thurston County, which is one of the criteria. They have to be able to pass a background check, and that includes not having any active warrants, anything like that would disqualify you from the process. We've had people that have had those types of things come up, but we direct them in the right place, get that taken care of, and then they can get back in the process and get on the waiting list again. Their income cannot exceed, I believe it's approximately $1,300 a month at the time of applying. After they've applied, if they reside there, they can earn more, but at the time of the application, if they make more than that, then they're over the limit.
And these little houses, little structures, are single person.
Right.
Single
occupants.
adults.
They
Right.
don't have roommates.
No.
Okay.
Right. That comes about in part because of the federal funding sources, which stipulate, well, federal and state, it's part of the Fair Housing Act. We can't say that both, if there were two occupants, they'd have to both be adults. And the decision early on was made not to have children living there full time, at least. And so the only way we could prevent that really was to say one person per cottage.
There are no children then.
There are no children residing there. A number of the residents have children in the near vicinity, and they're allowed to visit and spend the night sometimes on a limited basis. So there are children there a lot of the time.
So you can have visitors. The
Yes.
people that live there, they can have visitors.
Right. Those visitors have to go through the same vetting process, if you will, as residents in terms of background checks and lack of warrants and all that sort of thing, as do the folks who come on a regular basis to volunteer.
And there are no drugs or alcohol allowed. The residents cannot partake in any drugs or alcohol.
That's not quite accurate, because when we moved from the tent camp environment to the village environment, we agreed, we being both the Panza and the staff and the residents, to up our bar and say that the goal is to become clean and sober.
Okay.
And so in the lease agreement that the residents are signing, that is a stated goal and part of the criteria for what they should be doing while they're there, and if necessary, pressure that would be put upon them that they might lose their resident status if they're not working towards that goal. And initially, that was as far as we went, other than saying no, definitely no hard drugs, if you will, no evidence of hard drugs there or use thereof. Eventually, we also came to the point of saying to ban alcohol, because it turned out to be one of the more difficult substances to use, even though alcohol use is, quote, legal in our environment now, in our community. We were in a position to be able to say not there.
I can see that.
And that was important to do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about success stories. Now, the village in itself is a success story, but beyond that, are there people that have graduated the village and gone out and been able to purchase a larger home? And
we don't have any evidence at this point in time that people are getting to the point of being able to purchase, but we certainly have had some folks, and the number's not huge because of the nature of the folks that we're dealing with, that we're taking care of. But have moved on. Our best story is a young man who was already enrolled in Evergreen when he was part of the camp community, continued and graduated as a member of the village community. And when Interfaith Works opened its shelter downtown for nighttime shelter for homeless people, he got a job there as part of the staff, and chose to move back to town to be closer to that job. Others have left because of sort of not quite opportunities. A couple had a child while they were residents, and our rules don't allow children, as I said, so they moved on to other housing situations. The success stories include, I think we have three folks enrolled at SPSCC now, and we're looking forward to working with the administration of SPS to make that a growing concern, if you will, a growing opportunity for more residents. And we have one student now in a writing program for a degree at Evergreen. So we count that as our real success stories. These are folks that have been chronically homeless a lot of their lives, And so when they come to us, or certainly to the camp situation, they're likely to have been in a substance abuse situation and to be suffering from some degree of mental illness, as well as usually physical disabilities. And so we don't anticipate, and it's not our goal really to say, spend some time here and then move out to a better situation necessarily. We think that there will be some folks who flower best in a community like this. And to ask them to move on would be really harder for them than to stay. And so not everyone is going to go off to something more standard in our response to, in our hope for homes, if you will. So it's a mix. It's a real mix. And we're not trying to, as I say, stuff people back into standard housing.
Yeah.
As much.
Yeah. So if you're in a couple, can the couple share one of the residences?
They each have to have their own cottage.
Oh, they do have their own cottage.
Beyond that, we don't dictate how they live.
I see. Okay.
So, yeah.
In this communal area, it sounds like a really neat place. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's lots of friendships developing, and
I hope you agree. It's a strong community. We went through some turnover in our first year, having to do with some of the issues about substance abuse and so on, and we've been brought in something like eight new residents in maybe the last 6 months, something like that. And so the community that came from the village has fragmented a little bit, but it's now rebuilding itself. And because folks are now moving into with the goal of being clean and sober or staying that way, the role of community self-supporting supporting itself, a lot of peer support, mentoring, and so on, is happening there, and playing a very important role, so that when people do get together in that community building, it's for sharing meals, which they're cooking, some kinds of party atmosphere gatherings. There's a great Seahawks clan in there.
Nice. There's
and
television,
so
I guess.
Well, there is a television.
Cable.
Yes. Yes. Well.
So that means they get TCTV.
They do. That's right.
You've got to put this show on.
They'll know. They'll know. We struggled for a while on this, but we got Wi-Fi for the whole community, which is quite a feat. But anyways, they spend a lot of time on screens, or you're looking at screens.
Well, don't we all?
Yes, that's right.
It's really a necessary, utility these days.
Absolutely.
So it's like having running water.
Right. And in a way, it was just as much a right as having running water when it came down to
Well, I mean, you got to use the
Yes.
internet to look for a job or whatever.
For sure.
Communicate with family.
That was a big piece. How did the students do their homework?
Right, if they're going to college.
Et cetera,
Exactly. So.
Yeah.
There's no kitchens in the cabins. So
Correct.
everybody goes to the communal building to make a meal.
Right.
And they may have their own groceries in their cabin, or they keep those in the
It's a mixture. We provided lockable compartments in a pantry, and also lockable compartments in refrigerators, which was a feat to do, because there's not a lot of appliances out there that are made for that. The refrigerators turned out not to work very well, so we ended up just 6 people to a refrigerator, and they're sharing, and that's working fine.
this honor system.
Honor system.
Yeah.
But they still do have a lockable pantry space, and some choose to keep them keep things in their cottages, others in the pantry.
Raul, how do the chores work? When you assign people chores, do they alternate? Does everybody get one that they're always doing, or what do they do?
We have a list of chores, and we try to rotate everybody onto that list. So, for instance, you'll have something as general as the bathrooms in the community building. The kitchen is a separate chore. Then we have the outdoor grounds, our conference room, things like that, emptying garbages. People take out our recycling on certain days of the week. So what we do is we take the number of people that we have in the village that are capable of doing chores, because we do have some people that have disabilities and aren't able to participate with that. And we'll take that total number and we rotate. We go through the list and we'll say, this is your week to do the chore, the bathroom chore. They'll be assigned the bathroom chore for the course of the week. At the end of that week, somebody else moves into that rotation, and then they'll have about anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks off until their name comes up for another chore. But then the next time they come up, they probably won't have the bathrooms, they'll have the kitchen or something like that. So we try to rotate them through all the chores, go through all the people that are on the list to do chores, and that's how it works.
So it's fair for everybody.
Yeah, we try to make it as fair as possible.
How about the garden space? I know you guys have these garden spaces. Is that like everybody has their own plot, or there's one?
Both.
Big. Okay.
Both.
So there's a community one and.
We have an extraordinary green thumb person who helped generate the concept of having a community garden, and it's, I don't know, 40 by 40 or something like that. It's quite large, adjacent to the community building, and they put it in last summer with raised beds. It was just gorgeous. Hopefully we'll have a picture to show, but they raised a lot of food. A lot of it went to the food bank, and of course they ate as much as they could. We're talking this year about the possibility of actually it being income generating. But in addition, every resident has a small plot out front of their cottage, out off their front porch, for growing what they wish. And quite a few have just put in lawn, garden, and there's grass. Others have chosen to do other vegetables for themselves, or more ornamental flower arrangements and that sort of thing. So in the middle of the summer, it's quite a beautiful site.
Is this person with the green thumb an employee or a resident?
No. She's a resident.
Nice.
And her name is Sharon, and she has been. She came with the camp, so she's been there the whole time, and is a fireball when it comes to making things grow.
Great. I mean, that sounds successful. I've
is.
tried to grow vegetables.
Yeah. Well, it's also
hard
basically
to do.
an environment without trees, which is what it's hard for most of us. We have too many trees for gardens here. So there's a lot of good sun, and Panza is providing the annual new soil and fertilizer and all that's needed.
And that's part of the cost, the annual. What did you say it was like 200?
Over about 250. At the moment,
250,000.
it is. If the garden actually starts to produce income, then that would be rolled back into it, at least part of it. So.
And so, what are the other things that money is needed? I think we talked about this, but I'd imagine that you've got to have, you've got to have your Wi-Fi, you've got to have your water for that.
Utilities.
Utilities.
For sure. Money that we're putting aside for the future. Staff costs.
Oh, right, and the staff
two
costs,
staff
exactly.
members. And that takes care of most of it. Panza has some just discretionary funding. There's funding for training for our staff to make sure that they're adding on to their repertoires the skills they need to help the residents get to the life situation that they're hoping to reach.
And so, with that 250,000, there's a need for donations, and people can go to your website.
People can go to our website and individually donate, and we're in sort of an odd situation here where one of the things that we didn't talk about was our federal funding source. There are things called Section 8 vouchers, rental assistant vouchers, that normally, or in most situations, are through the Housing Authority given to individuals. And so that individual can take that to an apartment or whatever that they can't fully afford and use it to supplement what they can pay. There's also what they're called project-based ones, which get assigned to structures. And in fact, we've been offered up to 25 of those for 25 of our 30 cottages. And so even though some of the residents, quite a few of the residents, have little or no income, we're still guaranteed a certain amount of income through that system annually. For the indefinite future.
So that goes into that pot.
So that's building that pot up. But we still think that something like 25% of our funding will need to come from folks like the tribes that you mentioned, perhaps a foundation or two, and private individuals. So there's very definitely that. We've had wonderful support all along from the same folks who volunteered for all those hours to help the camp be successful, and it took a tremendous amount of volunteer labor. And we hope that they will continue to interact with us and be volunteers for us, and hopefully help us make our budget.
And I also noticed on your website that you actually ask people for specific items that they can donate, but you want them to contact you.
Absolutely.
And ask you exactly if they need it or not, if you need it or not.
Right, and that's true for all our contacts. I mean, I know that we've had a tremendous amount of visitors for all the reasons that you can imagine. The nature of Quixote Village as a response to homelessness. The whole tiny house world has come to see our structure.
It's big in Olympia.
So that it's our first concern is for the security and well-being of the residents.
Okay.
And when you've got people coming into your home every day, it gets tough. So we want to make sure that folks contact Raul first if they really want to come see what's going on, and if they want to know how they can contribute either time or financially.
Because you're looking for volunteers too.
We're looking for people specifically who have ideas to bring for things that will engage the residents and assist them in moving in the direction they want to go.
Oh, good.
During the camp situation, we needed bodies, we needed hosts to sit at a table 24 hours a day, and people to help us move. And now, because we don't, those requirements have gone. Also, the residents are cooking for themselves a great deal, which they weren't able to do in the camp situation. So, but we'd love to have people come share making a meal, for example, with the residents, teaching new dishes and all that sort of thing.
So
We've got a bunch of cooks there.
You need
Chefs,
head
sous
hunters,
chefs.
headhunters, people that can help with resumes.
Yes,
things like that.
Exactly that sort of thing, that's right.
Yeah, that sounds great. But you don't want people flooding into the village because this is their home.
We certainly welcome people to come visit. We
not
just
an
need
amusement
to,
park.
and so we just need to space it out so that the residents don't get freaked out.
You just recently had a big influx of reporters because you were in the New York Times.
That was about a year ago now, and that broke the dam. We had three or four major networks and everybody else, and we're afraid that the same is about to happen again because we are a finalist for a national award. For urban excellence, it's called. It's the Rudy Bruner Foundation, and so they're going to be coming out, and it may be that it's going to be a big feather in our cap, but it's certainly making national news, and that's going to create another interest wave, I'm sure.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank
I wish
you. We're
luck
very
for that
excited
award.
about it. Yeah.
We do probably have to leave it here and wrap it up, and I appreciate you guys coming and spending your time here at TCTV and talking about Panza and Quixote Village. So make sure you have those residents tune in when this comes on.
We'll
on
do
Channel
that.
77.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this with us.
All right. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next month. If you know of a local nonprofit that's making a difference in our community, give us a call at 956-3100 extension 103 or send an email to rkam@tctv.net.